As we all know, Pope Benedict XVI has gone to the Lord, and I just wanted to spend a few minutes with you, just sharing from my heart my remembrances of him. And as you may know, before I came to Christ the King, I was working at the Holy See at the Vatican for about 9 years, and about half that time was serving Pope Benedict XVI. I originally went to work in the Congregation for Bishops, which is one of the offices that helps the Holy Father with a selection of bishops around the world. But soon after I got there, I was asked to start to help with the papal masses and to serve in kind of an assistant capacity. And then at the end of that first year at the Vatican, I received the nomination as a papal master of ceremonies. It was a great honor. I was very humbled by that and kind of surprised. I mean, I'm just a kid from Oregon, Corvallis, lived out in the countryside. Never thought I'd be next to the Holy Father in divine worship, and so I joined this team, and as a papal master of ceremonies, you get to be close to the Holy Father a lot. Every time he prays publicly, we're there to help make sure it happens smoothly. And so I just want to share with you a few of the stories I have about Pope Benedict. And to share with you, who he was. As many of you may receive from mainstream media, that image that we receive from that is like this kind of stern and kind of gruff, and the Rottweiler and that sort of persona, and it's just completely false. That's not who he was. He was one of the gentlest. Absolute gentleman, even with people that he vehemently disagreed with. The epitome of charity, especially in discussion and in his demeanor. He's one of these people when he was talking with you is that you were the only person that mattered to him at that moment, and it just says a lot about his interior life and just what a great man he was. So in serving with him, I was always kind of in awe of him because I've been reading Joseph Ratzinger since I was in college and just found his theology very compelling, very fresh, very speaking to the times. And then to be able to serve him as when he was the Holy Father is just an absolute period of a lifetime, really. So a couple things to share with you. One is the very first time I was next to him. So the papal MCs were there's always two on either side of him at any mass, and the rest of the team is running different parts of the mass. So the very first time I was next to him, I was the guy in charge of the mitre. As you know, that's the hat that the bishop wears, and so I'm super nervous because this is my first time next to the Holy Father, and as Pope Benedict XVI, a man I've admired a long time, and I go to put the mitre on him, and as you know, the mitre it lays flat, and then it has these two tassels that come down, and so I go to put it on him, and I go behind his head and to lift it up and put it on him, and when I go to lift it up, it doesn't move, and I look, and Monsignor Guido Marini, who's the head MC, he's there, and he has grabbed one of the tassels, and he looks at me and he goes, and I realized to my horror that I was going to put the mitre on him backwards with the tassels going over his face, and I just quickly flipped it around and put it on him correctly. But I thought, and nobody was the wiser for it because Monsignor Marini was so smooth and so subtle and so I was just sweating the rest of the mass. When we got back to the sacristy, shared with Pope Benedict because he didn't know what had happened at the moment. He just knew it took a little bit longer than usual, and so we all had a good laugh about that. So that was my very first time next to Pope Benedict at Mass. Another real special moment with him was the one trip I got to take with him because the Pope goes around and goes to different places around Italy and around the world. Well, this was his very last trip, and it was to the Marian Shrine of Loreto, which is on the Adriatic coast of Italy. It's an absolutely beautiful shrine. It has the house of part of the frame of the House of Nazareth there, and so we took helicopters up there. And when you're on a trip like that, you just get to, it's just a little bit more personal. There's a little bit more down, different moments to be together, and just the way in which he carried himself in this kind of this serenity, never stressed or never, or if he was, he never showed it. They're just exuding the kindness of his personality and all of that. And so, kind of fast forward to after his resignation, I was in the room when he announced his resignation, because the papal masters of ceremonies also serve as kind of the pages to the College of Cardinals. So Pope Benedict had called a consistory to talk about the upcoming saints that were going to be canonized. It's kind of a very just kind of pro forma sort of gathering of cardinals, and usually just the cardinals in Rome show up for that meeting. So we're in a smaller room in the Vatican, and he begins his address, and he starts speaking in Latin, which is it's a little bit different because usually in those sorts of things we're just speaking in Italian, and my Latin's not super, but enough to understand what was happening, what he was saying, and boy, it was tough, and afterwards, everyone was just kind of dead silent in the room, and it almost felt like there was a grief. It almost felt like when someone has died, and that was so that was kind of a tough moment with him. And then moving onward, then I went on and served Pope Francis for 5 years, and then when I was leaving the service of the Holy See, I was approached by Archbishop Ganswein, who is Pope Benedict's secretary, and known him for years and worked a lot with him because he was always involved in the papal liturgies as well. And he said, after a Mass, he says, hey, I heard you're leaving the Holy See. Would you like to have a conversation? Would you like just to get some time with Pope Benedict before you leave? And I'm like, would I? Of course. And so he set it up, and I was happy. I couldn't believe that I was getting this opportunity, and so it was just one of these days before I left to come back here to Oregon. Met Archbishop Ganswein and Pope Benedict in the Vatican Gardens, and Pope Benedict sat down on a park bench, and I was invited to sit down next to him, and Archbishop Ganswein kind of wandered off, and so it was just 20 minutes of one-on-one conversation with Pope Benedict, and it was 20 minutes of a lifetime. And again, it was so human, and it was so, I felt like I was the only person that mattered to him at that moment. And he asked about Portland, and he understood, the difficult mission that we have here in such a secular culture. He knew Archbishop Sample, and he said to be sure to, encourage him in what he's doing in Portland. Assured him of his prayers, and then he asked me about my doctoral thesis, because I wrote on a Swiss theologian called Hans von Balthasar, who was a friend of his, and so he was asking me questions about what I wrote on, and I just gave him some ideas, and he kind of riffed off some of those ideas, and I'm just like, wow, here's one of the great theologians of our time. We're talking about the things that I wrote in this doctoral thesis. And then he encouraged me in my priesthood, and I was just so grateful. And the time ended, and we got up, and he gave me his blessing, and he went back to his monastery for his dinner, and I left there, and a few days later I flew out to come here. So just want to share with you some of these moments of Pope Benedict as we remember him. And I know a lot of you have said you've been on the Hallow app, of going through the 8-part series that Hallow asked me to do to help them with for the remembrance of Pope Benedict, and that was a beautiful project to work on, and I know a lot of you have been touched by that, and especially touched about the things that Pope Benedict said. And so I encourage you to read, read Jesus of Nazareth, read anything that he's done. His encyclicals, they're short, and they're understandable, and you can really gain something from them. So just want to share that with all of you, good parishioners, and that was a beautiful time of my life and my priesthood, and which I'll cherish for the rest of my life. And in saying that, it's like I do love it here. I love being your pastor. love it here at Christ the King. Love what we're doing. I think we're doing something very special in the church that is going to, it's all for the salvation of souls and for the building up of the Lord's kingdom. So thank you for listening. Hope it helped you in your remembrances of Pope Benedict. Let's pray for him, pray for one another, pray for your pastor, and may God bless you.